Thanks very much, Ros. It's great to be here. Great to see everybody. I think we're going to start by, Veronica, if we could have an image up here. We're going to talk about Maggie's recent exhibition in New York, your first exhibition in New York, which was called Real Time, a really phenomenal show. And this is from your Wall of Water series, which from 2012 to 14, which was one of the series in that exhibition, together with two new bodies of work. But as some people here may not be aware, Maggie, you suffered a heart attack on the eve of that exhibition. And, well, obviously you're here and in one piece, but I wonder if maybe you could tell us how you are and how this has affected you.
I see you've gone straight into the fucking heart attack. Marvellous.
I thought we'd get it out of the way.
But it is all true. We're supposed to be in New York for a week, and we installed the show on the Monday, and on the Tuesday evening I had the heart attack. So then the whole show happened without me, and I lay in hospital in Mount Sinai for 5 weeks, which was a miracle, because if it had happened in Suffolk, the ambulance would never have got to it. So if you're going to have a heart attack, the great thing is to go to New York, and the ambulance comes immediately, and you're whizzed into Sinai, and everything is absolutely hunky-dory and wonderful. The only trouble with it all is I've had to give up smoking. And for a professional smoker, that's pretty tricky. But everyone tells me how well I'm looking and 10 years younger, which is exceedingly annoying. Anyway, this is a wall of water. Next. Next. Next.
This is also a Wall of Water painting, and as I said before, these are from around a decade ago, but really one of your most important, relatively recent series. And one thing that always occurs to me, that strikes me when I look at these Wall of Water pictures, but a lot of paintings by you, is the way in which your work is full of you. You are in there. You're a presence in terms of your feelings, your emotions, whether or not you are making a portrait, a self-portrait. There is always a sense of you in the work. I mean, is that something you feel strongly is the case with all of your work?
It's very odd, James, because I always say to my students, the great thing is to get yourself out of the way, so that the truth can come through you into the paint, into the bronze, into the drawing, whatever you're doing. You know, to try and get your own baggage out of the way, so that, you know, an artist is supposed to be a seeker after the truth, so the truth can come through you and onto the canvas and the rest of it. So you're saying completely the opposite to anything that I attempt to do.
Perhaps, but I find myself agreeing with you because you are still there. It must come through you. Your own experience is impossible to circumvent. I mean, one thing I wanted, before we move on entirely from your recent experience, I happen to know that you're making the most extraordinary new work that feels and looks to me quite unlike anything I've seen from you before. And it feels to me that, you know, something in your recent experience is finding its way onto the canvas. You mentioned to me that something you were making recently is to do with Ukraine, and I can see that, but it's also clearly, to me at least, to do with what's happened to you.
He's very bright. He came into my life about 10 years ago and to do an interview, and I realized at once that he actually told me what my work was about, which is very useful. So this is the man who knows what my work is about far more than I do. So believe everything he says and don't take any notice of what I say. Next. Someone compared this to Folie Bergère. Though these walls of water were inspired by encountering an enormous storm at Southwold, a bit further up the coast from me in Suffolk, where these waves were crashing onto this sea wall, which was becoming increasingly fragile, it seemed. This little man-made sea wall, and the rage and the beauty And the terror of these waves, which were 20 feet high, they inspired these paintings.
But that's very interesting to me. I mean, again, your own personal experience, what you witnessed, this moment in your life is vital to these pictures. It's you know, it's a memory of something that was in the world, but in terms of, you know, what it says about you, I think it's also important. Oh, and we're looking here at, so this is from your new series in the New York show, Edge. Do you want to tell us a bit about these works and what they represent by contrast with...
But what does it say in that thing? I was supposed to tell you about how important East Anglia is to me.
That's what the blurb for our talk today suggests, that Maggie's going to be telling us about the importance of East Anglia in her. Well, do you want to do that, or do you want to...
This is not East Anglia. This is about the melting of the polar ice caps, something I feel very strongly about. And the whole series is called Edge, like we're living on the edge of this whole destruction that man is making at the moment. They are actually much larger than this, the real paintings. How tall are they? About 7 feet.
Yeah, a good 7 feet and narrow. And one, for me, an inescapable point of reference was Chinese scrolls of the kind that you find in the British Museum. And actually, that's one thing I wanted to ask you, which perhaps would lead us on to the novel, and something which I think is common to what we each do is about artistic inspiration or influence. I mean, if you take the resemblance of these Edge paintings to Chinese scrolls, particularly the ones that seem to depict Arctic wastes or mountains, were you thinking very specifically about those sorts of antique sources, or is it something that maybe came through more subliminally?
Well, what I love about those scrolls, which I saw a very long while ago in the British Museum, was the way there's some incident, and then in this magical space, the eye moved to another incident, and then another incident. And, you know, the whole Eastern thing of the paper or canvas being as eloquent where you have not touched it as where you have touched it. So there's a sort of, not in this one particularly, next, but sort of spareness about, and I wanted it to feel as though the ice was melting and becoming the indigo mass of water.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's very interesting, because it's in terms of you're not quoting or specifically alluding to an artistic source, but something about the way people were expected to look at these Chinese scrolls is finding its way into the way you construct these images from your head. The reason I mentioned that in relation to Tiepolo Blue is, for me, art was an important source all the way through writing this, and quite often there are direct, intentional, specific allusions to works of art, whether it's a painting by Poussin, which has quite an important role in the plot, or the work of Caravaggio. But at the same time, there are much more open-ended references, if you could even call them references. There are certain scenes where, you know, a reader is not necessarily going to know this, but I could explain that the way that figures are described in a certain scene are based on a painting by Peter Lely. And then even in a more open-ended way than that, I wanted, as the story goes on, for it to have this increasingly visual, intense visual quality, so that it's almost as if, for the main character, the whole world has become a work of art, and he's no longer looking, you know, at works of art as these sort of finite, condensed objects, but rather the world itself has become this kind of engulfing sensory experience for him.
Well, that works. And I mean, the thing that I felt about the book is, I mean, I couldn't put it down. I know that's a sort of corny thing to say about a book, but it's like an extraordinary journey which becomes faster and faster and faster as it gets towards the end. And I mean, I became Don, you know, the hero, as in any great bit of writing. You become the hero yourself. And however annoying he is, or however crazy he is, you are I don't know, to do with compassion or something like that. One identifies with the hero all the way through the book, and so it's happening to me. Do you know what I mean? Like when in front of an oil painting, which is something I think oil painting can do, which not many other things can do, is in front of a great oil painting, you feel as if you're there while it's being made. And that was very strong feeling in this book, that I'm there gently walking or running or doing whatever Don is doing in the book.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you say that. And actually, I have the same experiences, as you say, often in front of paintings, including yours, where you feel as close as you possibly could be to being in the position of the artist themselves, and inhabiting that space and that point of view. And with my main character, it was always important for me that you do have that sense of identification. I mean, just to explain a little bit, in terms of the background of this story, the main character, Don, is an art historian in his early 40s. It's the mid-1990s, and when we first meet him, he's spent his entire career, in fact, most of his life, in this Cambridge College Peterhouse, in this quite closed, rarefied community. And he's an expert on the 18th century Italian painter Tiepolo, hence the name of the novel. And he's got this idea that he can measure the space of Tiepolo's depictions of sky, these ceiling paintings that show kind of gods and goddesses flying around in the air. Don wants to be able to assign classical proportions to those. So a brilliant man academically, but fatally inexperienced in terms of love or life or the world. And then one day, a contemporary art installation, seemingly out of nowhere, lands on the lawn of his college. It induces this kind of manic hostility in him. He can't compute what he's seeing. He doesn't even understand that it's art at first. He ends up making a very public blunder. This leads to him leaving Cambridge. He moves to South London, where he starts a new career as the director of a small suburban art museum, a kind of fictional version of Dulwich Picture Gallery. And he's assisted in all of this by an old friend, this mentor figure, Valentine, whose intentions start to take on a more sinister aspect as the whole thing goes on. But it's also in London that he has this midlife gay coming of age, this epiphany where, as I say, his senses begin to sort of expand and deepen. And that also has to do for him with sexual liberation, with this young artist he meets who sort of draws him out of himself into the brave new art world of the 1990s, which of course you know all about, and the Soho gay scene, and more than anything induces these new desires and emotions in him. But more than anything, the important thing is that it is a kind of coming of age, but it's also about the dark side of epiphany and the way in which his life is also unraveling, even as he's coming to know himself better and embrace himself and see the world in new ways. And that, for me, is something I find a lot in your work, that double-edged quality, the feeling of the idea that several feelings are converging. In these new paintings you did in New York of this incredible series of animals, there are all sorts of feelings in there. There's this kind of mournfulness, this sense of creatures either in captivity or in the wild, but suffering in some way, combined in some instances, not perhaps this one, with this furious energy that almost has a kind of exhilarating kind of quality about it. It's as if several moods or ideas are sort of converging or colliding in the work. Is that how did it feel like that when you made these paintings of animals, or how did they come about?
Well, they're a natural move on from the walls of water and then the edge paintings, and the way we are treating animals was the next thing to get absolutely furious about. I mean, life dictates what I paint, and if something gets me by the short and curlies, I have to try and do something about it in my work. And I'd actually put off making these animal paintings for several years because, as Henry Moore said, the worst enemy of art is sentimentality. And so I hope these paintings are factual, if you like, and not sentimental. I mean, that's a rhino without its horn, for instance.
That for me is another interesting respect in which I think, your work compares with what I was trying to do in the novel, that interest in, above all things, realism or real life, the world as we find it rather than as you might like it to be. I mean, in some ways, when I was writing about the work in New York, I suggested that there's a more political edge to this work than in previous things you've done, because of the subject matter, because you're looking at the climate emergency, mistreatment of animals. But at the same time, I think I'm right in saying, but tell me if you disagree, that there is not a sort of polemical quality to it. You're not sort of beating any particular political drum. You're simply expressing what you feel and what you see, and that, in that sense, realism is more important than anything else.
Yeah.
Good. I mean,
Yes.
and I think it was the same for me. I mean, I think that in the novel, what mattered more than anything was a sense of the and this goes back to what you were saying about the importance of identifying. The character I created is, when you first meet him, a difficult, awkward, not entirely pleasant man, because in this rarefied academic world, a lot of us have met people like this.
Yeah.
There are people like that. The vestige of a society, a way of thinking from maybe 30 years in the past, or a lot longer. In fact, that Peterhouse community I was depicting really had its heyday in the 60s and 70s. But it's important, as you were saying before, that despite these flaws, these negative qualities, which I think are actually really interesting in fiction to explore, it's important that that identification begins to grow. And I think what brings about that identification is your apprehension of the reality of this person, of their mind, of their thought processes. And in his case, I hope that development begins to happen before too long. It's really when he goes to London that he's literally taken out of his old life into something new.
How much of yourself is in the character?
This is a this is a really interesting question, because, and it goes back to what we were first talking about how far personal experience is in there, or is to be circumvented. When you spoke about it coming through you, that's what I find. My own experience, my own background in the art world, the kinds of time I spent in these sort of elite university settings is all in there. But I should be clear that the character of Don is not me. I mean, I'm actually kind of horrified when people think that this could be a self-portrait of some kind, because, as I say, he is this deeply... I mean, he's a little older than me anyway. When we meet him, he's in his early 40s. I'm not quite there yet, but it's not that far off. But as a person, no, it's emphatically not me. But at the same time, he's my character, so of course I have to be able to identify him and sort of, like I said, sort of inhabit him. I think, as you have to be able to with any character. But the important thing about Don is he's not beyond redemption. I mean, even at the start, I think there is the sort of we see in him the germ of some wilder, freer, bigger existence, and that's in him from the beginning, I think. I won't give too much of the story away, but the fact that he's had this he's sort of not had any sexual or romantic life is partly to do with an early abortive experience that has sort of cauterized him emotionally and erotically. But the capacity for something is there in him, and I think even the capacity to look at art in some bigger way is there. Even though he's got these very rigid ideas about art and beauty and academic sort of aesthetics, he's got all those ideas, but underneath it, I think there's something else. And even early on in the story, there's this moment where he happens to walk past his desk and he looks down and sees this collection of Tiepolo reproductions laid out. And instead of just seeing the orderly cosmos, which he's used to seeing, he, for a moment, perceives just the colour, the blue. And that's the beginning of colour and art meaning, sort of having some meaning for him beyond the academic. There's a feeling there, instead of just, he's beginning to see rather than simply to look. But I think that, you're always there in your own work. And I do think that, we've spoken about this before, the idea that all of your work is at some level a self-portrait. Another thing about particularly the Walls of Water, but it's present in the more recent work by you, that links back to what I was saying about, you know, an epiphany that's also an unraveling. That double-edged quality, I mean, your work has always or often had this sense simultaneously of life and death happening in parallel, or being sort of, you know, an interdependent pair. You know, they're two sides of the same coin. They've always been
I
together.
do think that is the territory of art. Is you look at a Roscoe, you look at a Rembrandt, and there is life and death cohabiting at the same moment. I think that's really what great art can talk to us about. That they're one thing, in a way.
Yeah.
That bloody heart attack. I mean, tons of my work has been to do with the death of other people. I mean, George Melly, my mother, my father, Henrietta Moraes, you know, tons and tons of lovely, jolly paintings about other people dying. And now, Dame Death has called on me. Yeah.
But I mean, do you think it's fair to say, in all of the time in the past, when death was such a dominant theme in all of those ways, and you were painting people, you know, in the process of dying or sort of summoning people from the dead in your work, you were probably sort of working through ideas about your own mortality or what it means to be mortal. I mean, you know, I'm interested in this idea that art, whether it's writing a novel or painting a picture, is not so much about just putting down on canvas or on paper what you already think and know or, you know, want to say. It's more a process of finding out or working through or trying to arrive at an idea about
I mean,
mortality.
exactly. When, I don't know about you when you're writing, but when I'm really painting, I haven't a clue what's going on. Do you know what I mean? Something has, call it the muse, whatever you like. I mean, I do the same thing every day. I get up very early, I make a drawing, and I begin work in a very boring sort of fashion, the same thing every day, the same thing every day, in the hope that the muse might choose to arrive. And I live in a state of doubt. And, you know, you can have a whiskey at 6 o'clock and think you've done a good day's work, so you're celebrating. And the next morning, you look at it, it's complete shit. And then you think you've had a very bad day's work, so you again have your whiskey at 6 o'clock. And you look at it the next morning, it's not bad. So there are no rules. But when a painting is really painting itself, which is what I attempt all the time to make happen, does occasionally happen, then I don't know what's happening. And people, you know, people see waves, and in my waves they see animals and people and faces, and all kinds of things that have happened, which I didn't know about. They point them out to me. I say, jolly good.
It's really interesting to me, this idea of needing to step back from yourself and your work and see it from a slightly disengaged angle, and for it to mean something slightly different to you. And I found that a lot while I was writing this. You know, what initially seems maybe great, you go back and think, actually, that's dreadful, that can't go in. But then maybe think 2 days later, actually, that wasn't so bad after all. And funnily enough, in the story, I don't know if you remember, Don, the main character, is obsessively trying to write this book on the skies of Tiepolo. It's called The Skies of Tiepolo. And when he moves to Dulwich, he carries on working away at this book, this sort of magnum opus of his, which is going to define his career. And one evening, he, in a sort of frenzy, he writes, you know, thousands of words of academic prose, and then goes to bed exhausted and spent, and then wakes up the next day and is horrified to see what he's written and just thinks it's atrocious and he's got to destroy it. And it's exactly that process. But also there, I was trying to depict the difficulty that I think any of us has in coming momentarily face to face with ourself, you know, seeing yourself. I sometimes think it's a bit like catching sight of yourself in a mirror when you didn't mean to, or hearing yourself on a recording, which I know everybody hates. It's that.
Well, when I was a student at the Slade, the painter Robin Denny was my tutor. And he said to me, there'll come a time when you see yourself in your work, and that's what you've got to work with. Most people, when they see themselves in their work, are so appalled, they spend the rest of their lives pretending they're someone else. He said, when you see yourself in your work, that's what you've got to work with. It was a wonderful thing to have said.
Yeah. And then there's that question of, well, what is, you know, self anyway? And in this book, it feels to me like the main character, his masks are slipping, you know, away one by one. And this idea of persona is something that's always interesting to me. I remember when I first came to your studio, Maggie, in 2012, you'd done this extraordinary series of paintings of your friend, who was by then dead, I think, Sebastian Horsley, these paintings of Sebastian, who was this incredible sort of dandy figure, sometimes in all his garb, but in other paintings seeming much more kind of naked and even sort of, well, literally dead in some of them. And that felt very much to me about persona and what it means to have a persona, or equally for the mask to slip, and the question of what does that leave behind. I mean, is that something you were thinking about in those paintings, or is it something you're interested in anyway when you paint people?
Well, when I do a portrait, I mean, I try and paint the spirit of the person. I mean, a likeness just happens. That's nothing. I try and paint the spirit of the person that I'm trying to paint.
Yeah, yeah.
And love comes into it, you know, this corny old word called love. I mean, and like the people I've refused to paint, like Mrs. Thatcher, for instance, you know, because what I felt for Mrs. Thatcher was nothing like love. And so I painted people with whom I feel some kind of rapport, some kind of empathy, some kind of feeling between us. And to paint a portrait is a bit like a love affair, in that in the end you hope there's a decent painting and not a broken heart, you know?
I mean, I guess what I was getting at in terms of Sebastian is the fact that his this kind of dandified, flamboyant persona, it wasn't really a mask, or it wasn't just a mask, but it seemed like it really was it was who he was.
No, he was a very fragile, febrile, sensitive character. He always called me mother, which was a bit odd. And I called him my wicked son. But, I mean, he this febrile, delicate, fragile thing that was dressed up in this way.
And that was a kind of armour, I guess.
Yes, an armour.
I mean, I remember you saying, and I've never forgotten this expression when I interviewed you all that time ago, that those paintings of Sebastian were about him, you know, the pain of having to face yourself, the pain of him having to face himself, you know, and what it means to have to sort of, you know, none of us can step outside of this, you know, and there's a line I love from, I think it's Saul Bellows' novel Herzog, where the main character says, you know, it's okay for the rest of you, I have to go back to being me, you know, you can't get away from that. I mean, you know, and you must find this because you are a public figure, you know, you for a long time you've been a very public figure, and I mean, but I also know that you've said to me that sometimes the one thing that feels real is when you're in the studio. I mean, how do you sort of straddle the two or negotiate between the two?
Yes, it's true. The only, I mean, the show in New York was called Real Time. And when I'm in the studio trying to make a drawing, trying to make a painting, that is real time. And the rest is the rest. I mean, the rest is having a bit of a laugh. The rest is the rest. And you mean this sort of national treasure malarkey?
I suppose that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
I tell you something about being a national treasure. There's no money in it.
I think one final thing I want to ask about before we maybe open up for questions, if anyone has them from the floor, is, I mean, this links also to you working in the studio and the whole creative process. It's something I think about a lot. The importance of being free from inhibition. In fact, we were talking a bit about this just before we came in. Not, you know, when you're working, you know, painting or writing, not feeling under any sort of duress or constraint in terms of what you want to say or how you want to say it. Is it fair to say that, I mean, this is a big topic now culturally in terms of, you know, there are lots of questions about who gets to say what and who has the right to dictate the terms of a debate. And I mean, I know that when I set this novel in the 1990s, I was interested in how a lot of today's debates about cancel culture and censorship and those sorts of things were being incubated or beginning to be articulated in the 1990s. And it's always felt to me as if art, you know, this individual thing that someone does, a painter or a writer, you know, in its best and purest form is about resisting any kind of inhibition or censorship. You know, worst of all and most of all, the kind of censorship you might enact on yourself.
Absolutely right.
Good. I'm glad you agree. Well, look, should we open up the floor for questions if anyone would like to
Yes.
ask me or Maggie anything? I don't know if there's a mic. Oh, here we go.
Thank you so much. Hello, I'm a massive fan. Anyway, I've got a question. It's kind of selfish for myself, but I'm sure if there are artists in the room, they'll benefit. So you talk about hoping that the muse will find you when you start work. So obviously, as an artist, you can struggle finding that muse or that muse finding you. When you get to if you find the moment where that moment isn't happening, is there like a ritual? Is there something you do that you go out and try and become inspired so you can find yourself in the work again? I mean, apart from whiskey, obviously, but I find gin helps.
I don't have a whiskey till 6 o'clock. And I get up very soon after 5 in the morning. That's quite a long wait for the whiskey. No, I mean, I sit there and I look at what I'm doing and I feel full of doom and gloom. I mean, I'm not just saying that, you know, I think, what the fuck are you doing? You know, call yourself an artist. You know, what the hell are you doing? And I'm full of all that doubt and stuff. And then suddenly, for some reason, something will happen that I begin to paint, probably with my left hand, as I'm normally right-handed, and something a bit better will happen for no reason. I mean, if I could make a reason for it, I'd, you know, if I, like Marcel Proust having a, you know, Madeleine or something and make it all work, I would do it. But I don't know what makes it happen. It's very mysterious where it comes from or what makes it happen at a certain moment. It's very mysterious. Do you find that?
I do. I mean, sometimes I think, oh, my brain for once is finally it's releasing something. It's working. If only it was always like this, and it's instead of being 10 minutes. And the rest of it is just kind of applying yourself, I think, and trying to sort of squeeze or, you know, wring something out of your head or, you know, whatever it is. I often find just getting something down, however bad or incomplete or provisional it seems, is the key thing. You know, and just occasionally the thing that comes out first is actually, as you were saying before, is occasionally it's actually not that bad.
Yeah. I thought you were going to ask me the traditional question that people always ask about how I know when something's finished. I'll give you the answer. It's the traditional thing. How do you know when a painting or whatever it is finished? And the best answer was given by Andy Warhol, who, when asked how he knew when a work was finished, simply said, when it's sold. That's right. I mean, it's nothing to do with the money. The fact is it's gone. It's gone from the studio. You can't fiddle with it. You can't do anything more about it. It's gone. Great answer. When it's sold.
Question here.
These are fabulous, and I wondered if you're using new mediums, and does that also inspire you when you think, I'm going to try this now, I haven't worked with this before? Or
No, it's just oil paint and canvas.
Same.
Just the same.
Yeah.
But I mean, oil paint is this sort of live, sexy stuff that I constantly experiment with, and you know, new marks happen. It's something that's alive, and so you're working with this live force, which is oil paint, and new things happen all the time, but it's just jolly old oil paint.
I can see a hand, yeah, over here. Oh, okay, but that way around then. That's...
Thank you. Your statue of Mary Wollstonecraft was criticised for being or objectifying women. I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
I took the telephone off the hook. I refused to answer. I mean, do you know, it was a lot of feminists were against it. I mean, I don't know if feminists don't have bodies or something. And I mean, and what was really annoying was that in papers, and the only thing that was reproduced was the little nude figure at the top and not the whole sculpture. That was intensely annoying. But I mean, a great many more people have heard of Mary Wollstonecraft now than ever did before, which must be a good thing. Anyway, as Oscar Wilde said, when the critics are divided, the artist is at one with himself. Very good. Very good. And the great actor Donald Wolfett, when he got a good review, would say, "Oh, written by a very intelligent person." And when he got a bad review, he'd say, "Written by one of my enemies." Very good. So you've had good and bad reviews, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's good to keep that in mind, definitely. I mean, I also think that this question of, and it comes up when people review stuff, you know, whether it's art or anything else, this question of what art is supposed to be or supposed to do, or the role it's supposed to play, is a really sort of charged one. And I'm always curious when people have a sort of very preconceived idea or a set idea of what they think art should be. And it also seems, in some of the reactions to work that you've made, I sometimes feel that there's this kind of heightened shock or this heightened outrage people feel in relation to art that they might not feel in relation to other things. And that I always find curious as well. I mean, I've heard another artist who we know say once that, you know, people are often going on about how her work is shocking, and that always slightly bemuses her, because if you want stuff that's shocking, you only need to turn on the news to see what's going on in the world. But art seems to have this kind of protected or elevated status. It sort of seems to people, really kind of gets people going in terms of when you've done the wrong thing or expressed something in a way that doesn't align with how they feel the world should be. I can see, was there a question at the back first, or we'll go where the microphone is, and then okay, and then over here.
I wanted to know when you felt or you knew you were an artist, when you felt compelled for art and nothing else.
What, him or me?
For you, Maggie.
Okay, there was an art exam at school when I was 14, and I did nothing but flick paint at people and generally draw attention to myself, because I was deeply in love with the biology mistress who was invigilating the exam. And then I saw the clock, and it was 3:20, and I knew that at 3:30 I got a hand in a painting, so I did one. And when the results came out 2 or 3 weeks later, I was top of art. And I thought, oh, this is quite interesting. You know, you don't have to try, and you're good at it, you know. And then I remember staying up and trying to paint the night sky out of my bedroom window till about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I took them into school the next day, and they were all laid out, and the other girls were all laughing at them. And the art teacher, dead now, called Yvonne Drury, who was a real artist who practiced and showed and all the rest of it, said, "What's the matter?" Because I was standing up the corner on the point of tears. And I said, "Well, I've done these paintings and everybody's laughing at them." And she said, "Well, it just must be water off a duck's back." So this was a very important thing to somebody to say. Don't give a bugger what anyone says about your work. You're your own best critic. And so at the age of 14, I began to be an artist.
Have we got time for a couple more?
There's that one up that corner.
Thank you. Question for James, actually. Why Tiepolo is the short question. The longer one is, what came first? Your love of the artist? Was he always going to be in the book, or the influence, or the book, and then you found the artist? Thank you.
Oh, thanks for that question. Yeah, and people sometimes wonder whether I like Tiepolo because I've made this character who is initially such a difficult, obtuse man. I've made him love Tiepolo, but I do love Tiepolo's work. There's something actually about those ceiling paintings in particular in churches and palaces that's really exhilarating and vertiginous, this feeling of space and depth, and this sort of energy of movement that they have. So that was what I think for a long time I've loved the work and thought it would be fascinating to write about it. And and then in the novel, I think the fact is that you can talk about Tiepolo's work in certain quite rigid or formalist ways, or in terms of their kind of classical content, the fact that there's a sort of classical, Greco-Roman subject or allegory quite often. But at the same time, there's that other dimension that I just spoke about, this much sort of freer, more exhilarating, sort of wilder quality that they have. And actually that's quite nice then in terms of the trajectory that this main character goes on, away from this very closed, circumscribed existence where he's in a way sort of imprisoned by his own academic brilliance and his renown and his professorial persona, away from that into something more large, this world of possibility, this world of kind of amplified, deepened sensations. Tiepolo somehow made sense in terms of all of that. I guess also finally there's quite a nice contrast to be drawn between the work of Tiepolo, who is a sort of representative painter of the 18th century, the Rococo, and then on the other hand the art of the 1990s, which actually plays a really important part in this novel as well, this kind of this art made out of found objects, stuff that people didn't think could be art, this seemingly kind of shocking new art in that decade, and how that contrasts with something apparently much more kind of classical and historical and dignified. I can see a hand over here and one here, but let's see where if the microphone can.
Hi, I have a question for Maggie. Your recent works are fairly monochromatic. Did you see them like that at the start, or did you actually start with lots of colours, but it felt it had to be more blues and whites and blacks?
The colour is indigo. I mean, in the edge paintings, it's just indigo and white. I don't know, there's something sort of infinite about the colour indigo. It's a very, very dark blue, and it seemed to be right for the... It's all about something being there and not being there. Like the ghosts of the polar bears in some of the paintings. It's about the death of the ice cap and the tragedy of that. It's like a lament, and somehow the colour indigo seemed to be the right colour. I don't know why.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Maggie, when you were in hospital in New York after your heart attack, away from your family and obviously very scared, pumped up on drugs, warfarin, etc., did you ever consider that your painting might be different when you got back to it? Did you ever worry about how your painting would turn out when you were maybe not perhaps thinking clearly because of your experience?
No, I just read Just William. I took Just William away from my desert island discs. I think Just William is really fantastic, the way he always finds a way. I mean, as a child, I identified with Just William, and I still do. So I didn't think at all about art. I mean, what I might do. I knew something would happen, but I didn't think any more about it than that. I just tried to keep going.
Did you draw in hospital?
A bit.
We've got time for one more question. Okay, I saw first the arm go up at the end there. So.
Thank you both. Your paintings, Maggie, illustrating your thoughts on ice caps, polar melting, and the slaughtered animals. How do you see that? Have you seen that following through in people's behaviour or reaction or communication to you afterwards?
Well, nobody bought any of the animal paintings. They found them too distressing. I'll have to start doing a few roses round the door. I don't know. I just paint what's, as I say, whatever life or now death tells me to paint. And I can't think about my audience or how people will react. I mean, people react, you know, some people love my work, some people hate my work, a great many people are quite indifferent to it. But I mean, it's what I do. And so you can't think about what people will like or how they will react. I'm just trying to be true to whatever I'm trying to do.
I think that's a good note on which to end things. So thank you everybody very much, and thank you, Maggie.
Thank you. That was wonderful.